Let me tell you something that will either make you laugh or make you uncomfortable, and maybe both. Every year, universities around the world spend millions of dollars, months of preparation, and enormous amounts of human energy on accreditation. Committees are formed, documents are written, policies are created, and sometimes overnight. People who haven't spoken to each other in years suddenly become best friends, and then evaluators leave. And everything slowly, quietly goes back to exactly the way it was before. I've spent over decades working in higher education quality assurance across Saudi Arabia, Jordan, the UK, and beyond. And I can tell you, the mistakes I'm about to share with you do not belong to one country, one culture, or one accreditation system. They belong to all of us. Today I'm going to walk you through 5 of them, honestly, without corporate language, without diplomatic softening, just the truth from someone who has been in the room. Let's go. Welcome to Quality Unlocked. I'm Dr. Ahmed Mugableh. I created this channel because I got tired of watching the same thing happening repeatedly in higher education. The people who actually know what works, and I mean here the practitioners, the people who have sat in evaluation visits, who have written SSRs at 2 a.m., who have watched institutions succeed and fail at accreditation. Those people almost never share what they know publicly. In fact, that knowledge stays in offices, in meetings, in corridor conversations between people who survive the process together. And my duty here is to change these facts. So if you work in quality assurance, academic leadership, or you simply care about whether universities are actually doing what they are supposed to do, you are in the right place. This is Quality Unlocked, and today we begin. Before I get into the 5 mistakes, I need to tell you something. Something that sounds simple, but that most people working in higher education have never really stopped to think about. Accreditation is not the same thing as quality. I will say it again because it's worth hearing twice. Accreditation is not the same thing as quality. Accreditation is a process. It has standards, timelines, documents, visits, a beginning and an end. Quality is something completely different. Quality is a culture. It is a way an institution thinks and behaves on Tuesday afternoon in February when no evaluators are watching and nobody is filling out a form. Here's what happens when an institution confuses these 2 things. They spend enormous resources, money, time, people, trying to look good during an evaluation, trying to perform quality, trying to convince a panel of external reviewers that everything is excellent. And while all that is happening, the actual educational experience of their students quietly deteriorates. And nobody notices because everyone is busy preparing for the visit. Keep that distinction in your mind. Accreditation versus quality. Process versus culture, as I walk you through these 5 mistakes, because I promise you, every single one of them comes from exactly that confusion. Mistake number 1. I call this one the calendar problem, and I have seen it in every country I have worked in. Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Malaysia, institutions working with international bodies like Accreditation. And here's how it goes. The evaluation visit is scheduled for, let's say, 18 months from now. And on the day the date gets announced, something magical happens in the institution. People wake up. Suddenly there are committees. Suddenly there are meetings. Suddenly faculty who haven't updated their course files since 2019 are updating their course files. Suddenly everyone cares about quality. The visit happens. It goes reasonably well. Everyone exhales. And then slowly, over the following months, the committee stop meeting. The files stop being updated. The energy fades. and the institution drifts quietly and comfortably back to exactly where it was before until the next visit is announced and the whole thing starts again. I have watched this cycle happening in so many universities, and here's the uncomfortable truth I want you to sit with. If your institution only looks like a quality institution during an accreditation cycle, then I have to be honest with you. It's not a quality institution, it's a performing one. And here's the thing about experienced evaluators. They have seen hundreds of institutions, and they know the difference between a culture that has been built over years and the performance that has been rehearsed for months. And they are absolutely able to touch it in the first hour. Trust me on that. Mistake number 2. And this one I feel strongly about because I don't think people talk about it honestly enough. The self-study report, the SSR, whatever your framework calls it, is supposed to be the most honest document your institution ever produces. It's supposed to answer a very simple question. How well are we doing? And how do we actually know? But what I see, and I have seen this across institutions on multiple continents, is that the SSR becomes something else entirely. It becomes a marketing document, a showcase, a highlight reel. In other words, weaknesses get reframed as areas for development. Problems get buried in language so careful and diplomatic that they effectively disappear. Strength gets amplified so far beyond what evidence supports that they bear almost no relationship to reality. And I understand why this happens. But the question here, do you really understand why this is happening? The people doing this are not dishonest. They are very protective. They love their institution. They have worked hard. They don't want to hand evaluators a document that makes the place look bad. I understand that instinct or feeling. Completely I understand. But here is the problem. Evaluators are not reading your SSR to find out how good you are. They already know what a good institution looks like. They are reading your SSR to find the gap between what you claim and what evidence actually show. And they are very, very good at finding it. In my point of view, an SSR that honestly says, here are 3 things we are not doing well. Here's why, and here is our specific plan to address them. That SSR will constantly outperform a polished, confident, beautifully formatted document that claim no significant weaknesses exist. Not because evaluators enjoy bad news, but because from my point of view, intellectual honesty is one of the clearest signals of institutional maturity, and they recognize it immediately. Mistake number 3, and this one has a geography problem. In too many institutions, quality assurance exists on an island. The island is called the Quality Deanship, or the Accreditation Unit, or the Quality Committee, or my personal favorite, the people who deal with that. On this island, a small and dedicated group of quality professionals work incredibly hard. They write documents, they track indicators, they prepare reports, they do genuinely important work. And then evaluators arrive. They walk into departments, they sit with faculty members, alone, without any institution representatives present. And they start asking questions. Can you describe your program's learning outcomes? How do your assessments measure them? What happens when students constantly underperform on particular tasks? What role do you play in a program review? And if the faculty member has never been part of real equality conversation, if equality was always something that happened on that island, not something they owned personally, those questions do not get good answers, no matter how beautiful the SSR was. Here's what I want you to understand. Quality assurance is not a function. It's not department. It's not something that the quality people do. It is a shared professional. It is belong to every faculty member, every department head, every administrator, every leader in the institution. The institutions that genuinely understand this, that distribute ownership of equality across every single person in the building, those institutions are never caught off guard by an evaluator questions, because everyone in the building has already been asking themselves the same questions for years. Mistake number 4. And honestly, this might be the one that matters most, because it is the one that most directly affects the students. Let me ask you something. If I told you a restaurant had passed every health inspection with the flying colors, would you assume the food was excellent there? Of course not. You would only assume it was only safe, which is a completely different thing. Accreditation standards work the same way. They are the floor. They establish the minimum threshold, the level below which no institution should operate. They were designed to prevent the worst, not to guarantee the best. And yet, I watch institutions treat these standards as both the floor and the ceiling simultaneously. They ask, are we meeting the standard? The answer is yes, and then they stop there. That gap between meeting the standard and genuinely excelling is where the educational experience of your students lives. The institutions that produce genuinely transformative educational experiences ask completely different questions. They don't ask, are we meeting the standard? They ask, given what we know about how people learn, given what our students actually need, given what our community genuinely requires, what does excellence look like for us? And then they go and build that with accreditation standards as a checkpoint along the way, not the destination. That shift from compliance to genuine quality is the most important shift any institution can make. And it costs nothing except a willingness to ask harder questions. Mistake number 5, which in some ways is the one that breaks my heart the most, because it happens after everything else has gone right. The institution prepared it properly. The SSR was honest and evidenced. The faculty were genuinely engaged. The evaluation visit went very well. The evaluators were very impressed. And then the report arrived. This report, written by some of the most experienced higher education professionals in the world, who spend days examining your institution with depth and objectivity that no internal review can replicate. This report is one of the most valuable documents your institution will ever receive. And you know what happens to it in too many institutions? It goes in a filing cabinet. The relief of having survived the visit is so overwhelming that the institutional energy just deflates. The report gets acknowledged. Maybe there's meeting about it. Maybe someone writes a responsive plan. And then life goes on. And the filing cabinet stays closed. The institution that genuinely benefited from accreditation treats that report like a gold. Every recommendation gets assigned to named person. Every finding gets a deadline. Progress gets tracked and reported at the highest institutional level. And when the next evaluation visit arrives, those institutions can sit down with the evaluation panel and say, here's what you told us last time. Here's what we did about it. And here's the evidence of improvements. That moment is the most powerful signals of equality culture that an evaluators can witness. It tells them something that no documents ever could. It tells them that this institution is for real. So here we have the 5 mistakes: the calendar problem, the highlight reel, the island, the floor and the ceiling, and finally the filling cabinet. What connects all five of them is that distinction I started with, the difference between accreditation and the quality, between the process and the culture, between performing well when someone is watching and being genuinely excellent all the time. The institution that get this right are not necessarily the wealthiest, or the most prestigious, or the most resourced. They are simply the ones where the people, the faculty, the students, the administrators, and even the leaders have genuinely asked themselves the question that should sit at the heart of every university on earth. What are we here for? And are we honestly, really, evidentially delivering it? That is what this channel is about. And that question is what Quality Unlocked is here to help you answer. If today it resonated with you, if you saw your institution in any of these 5 patterns, I want to hear from you. Leave a comment. Tell me which one hit closest to home. I read every single one. Subscribe if you want more of this. New episode every 2 weeks. No fluff, no corporate language, just honest practitioner knowledge from someone who has been in the room. And share this one with a colleague who needs it, because the conversation that actually change institutions are the ones that almost never happened loudly enough. I'm Dr. Mugableh. This is Quality Unlocked. I'll see you in 2 weeks.